Welcome to AAPC's The Future of Political Consulting. In this episode, Maya Hutchinson of Battleground AI sits down with Trent Wisecup of FP1 to discuss how artificial intelligence is changing the business of political consulting itself. As AI takes on more execution, from research and content creation to communications and operations, consultants have an opportunity to do more. Serve more clients, tackle more complex challenges, and focus on the strategic judgment and relationships that remain uniquely human. Join us for a conversation about what AI is automating, where consultants create the most value, and how firms can position themselves for growth in an increasingly AI-enabled future.
All right. I'm really excited to join Trent for a conversation, a practical conversation around AI and how it is really being used in practice at his firm, a real leader in this space. So excited to chat with you, Trent. Before we dive in, do you want to share more about your firm, about FP1, about your work, and share with the listeners about yourself?
Yes, great. I'm excited to be here. Love talking about AI. It's very exciting. FP1 Strategies is a political consulting firm. We're a Republican firm. We do advertising, general consulting. We do polling. We do direct mail. So we're kind of a full service firm. Since our inception in 2012, we've helped elect 38 U.S. senators, 64 congressmen, and 8 governors. So we've had a good run of success, and we're all in on AI, so really appreciate the opportunity to talk about that.
Incredible. Well, I know that you and your firm are, really pioneering, but also, you're an award-winning writer, producer from the creative perspective. How is that background really shaped? And can you talk about your sort of that role and your political communication background a little bit and how you got here?
Yeah, well, I've been doing this for 3 decades, so I'm deep into my career, and that's what's exciting to me about AI as I see as being at a dawn of a new era of advertising and communications. I'm the creative director here, so I do, the bulk of the copywriting and the ideation, and then I also do a lot of the post-production and, managing our production team here. So AI has been a game changer for me as a creative director and us as a firm, and it just opens so many new doors creatively. It's really exciting, and we are really encouraging all of our team to do this, providing trainings, and we can get into what we do culturally here.
Yeah.
But as a content creator, I've never been more excited about politics in my work. It's really deepened my commitment to my profession and my work.
I love hearing that. That's really exciting. And as obviously as the sort of leader of and one among your firm, what as you think about sort of the workflow, client services, growing your firm, sort of like and sustaining your firm, what pushed you to be early adopters in AI? Was there something that sort of sparked that, or could you talk a little bit about where that came from as a strategy?
Yeah. So I think the big catalyst for us, saying we've got to really ramp up with AI was about a year ago when Gemini rolled out VO3, and you probably remember the internet was afire with all of the AI videos, and everybody was talking about it. And I'll use a Cold War reference because I'm in my 50s. It was like a Sputnik moment, and we're like, look, we're not where we need to be. I mean, there were certainly people here who were using AI in their workflows, and particularly in our digital department, they were a little ahead of the rest of the business. But as a creative director, it was a big wake-up call for me. I didn't even have an AI account at that point. And I was like, oh my gosh, here we go. It's a fight or flight moment. Either I'm going to catch up or I'm going to get left behind. So I just really, really immersed myself. I got accounts with ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini. For me personally, Gemini is the most useful because you can upload video to it and it can respond to video. And I deal with ad videos production.
Mm-hmm.
So I, spent like, the last 6 months or something just rewiring the entire way I think about ads and infusing AI into everything we do. So that's my personal use of it. But, stemming off of like, the rollout of VO, we really started thinking about how can we drive cultural change throughout the firm.
Mm-hmm.
So there's several things that we do. We launched a series called AI Innovators where we spotlight younger team members who are doing cool and innovative things with AI. We write blog posts on them, put them on the website. We created FP1 Labs, as sort of a brand for our innovation initiatives. We have T-shirts. I mean, we are heavy pushers of AI in a positive way. We see it as a way to really make our team more effective, more efficient, and better at their jobs. And, I know there's a lot of fear that AI is going to replace people. We don't see that. We think it's going to make our team better and our firm stronger. And that's how we see it.
Yeah, I that's really exciting. And I think especially I definitely was going to ask you about how that gets infused into your, the rest of your team, from leadership down. In terms of your firm and, over the last year, as you've implemented those tools and sort of gotten more folks on your team on board, is there, is this showing up in your business too? Are you seeing that this is creating sort of a competitive advantage for, this is an industry that we're constantly, competing, and also it's the name of the game is competition. How does this help serve your clients? How does this help sort of strengthen, if it does, your business?
Oh, I think it definitely does. I think that there's so much interest and energy around AI. People want to talk about it because they see the power of it. And so if you are a leader in it, I think that definitely accrues to the bottom line. We have several conceptual AI ads that we put on reels, and people think they're fun and they're cool because they are fun and cool and they are different. And AI allows you to do things that otherwise would cost, $100,000 in weeks to plan. And you can do one of these really conceptual ads in an afternoon. And so that is a game changer. And, clients, when we sell advertising, the reel that you show is really important. So being able to have like cool AI ads, I think has made a difference. Again, our digital team is really innovative on this, and they've used AI to develop synthetic testing tools. So we're able to sort of dial test a script like you would in a focus group, and come out with really strong diagnostic readings on that. The tool is built off of voter data, so there's been a lot of interest in that. So I definitely think it's a powerful new business opportunity, and it also just elevates the quality of the work. And obviously, the better you are at doing the work, the more clients you're going to sign, right? Best way to get new business is to win the races that you've been working on. So I think it all fits together.
Yeah, absolutely. Can you speak a little bit about you mentioned Gemini as one of the tools, and then you just mentioned an internal tool. And I was wondering, and also absolutely curious, how are you thinking about that sort of like external tools versus building internal tools? I think there's always this conversation about like build versus buy versus, a combination of both. Do you think about that in sort of the practical applications of how your firm grows? I know there's, a lot of talk about big agencies building these massive tools internally. Would love to hear your thoughts on how you're thinking about them.
Yes, we do build things, and I think that agents are going to be very important in the future. I just built my first gem. It was a very exciting moment inside Gemini. I think the great thing about AI is you can be really sophisticated and build things like you just said, or you can be a relative novice and still get enormous value out of the LLMs that are out there. I think like it was for me when I was new to AI. I was like, oh wow, this is really daunting. Am I going to be able to do this? I'm not necessarily the most tech savvy person out there, but I feel like I can use this to become very innovative in it. And I think that's the great thing about AI. If you just get inside of it and start asking it, this is the task, how can you help me do it? It's amazing the journey that you can start with that. So I think it's both. I think that, the technology is going to evolve and it's going to become more powerful, and the things that you're able to do with it are going to be amazing. So, being able to build, cutting edge tools that solve challenges in the industry, I think that's going to be the cutting edge. But I know that there are probably still a lot of firms, in the industry that, have been a little, skeptical about AI. I would encourage everybody to figure out how to use it, and it can benefit anyone. I think that's
Yeah.
the power of the technology.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like even if you spend a lot of time learning it and you decide, oh, it's not for you, okay, but at least you really need to understand it and try it and figure that out. And I think that sort of leads me into my, a thought, especially as you just mentioned around the industry. And there's certainly hesitations around certain elements being automated. What do you see as like, and I would frame it more as like certainly opportunity. Where are you seeing areas that like have opportunity for much more automation? And then, on the other side, where are you seeing the parts that are like deeply human, that, where the human side and your decades of experience and races and winning, where that piece is more and most important?
Here internally, like a lot of our reporting from our buying is like almost becoming entirely driven by agents and automated. That's a
Mhm.
huge lift of a burden off of like the people that do our buying. It allows them to be much more strategic. So I think it's like stuff like that. Definitely AI is going to automate a lot of it, synthesizing research, or, going through, you know, creating decks, creating memos, all that stuff. I think AI can be the first step of that. And it certainly can with creative. I mean, I think AI can be used to, create tons of iterations that you can choose from. I don't really use it that way. I use AI a little bit differently, and I could be an anomaly, but I do feel like there is a paradox in that AI can actually add to your workflow because you enjoy doing the work so much with it and you see what it can do as a quality enhancement tool. So I think AI is definitely a speed and efficiency tool. There's no doubt about it. But I don't think that that's really the holistic way to think about AI. I think AI can also be a powerful tool in the ruthless pursuit of excellence. So for me, the way I use AI is I kind of write like the first draft of what I want to do, and I really use AI as a refinement tool. The agent I've built like kind of grades my scripts across like 3 different categories: copy, strategy, craftsmanship, and so I can really get in there and iterate with it and get to like where I want it to be, and I see how it elevates my craft every day. So, I think it's both. I think it's definitely a speed and efficiency tool, but, I think you can also really use it in the pursuit of excellence. And I think that's the best use of AI. I think the best use of AI is when people put a little elbow grease behind it and think about it. So, I think it can offload like administrative stuff and then free you up to spend more time grinding with AI and doing cool things.
Yeah, I know almost think about it as like that last mile, you
Yeah.
get really far, the 80%, and then you're trying to really refine at the end. Um, and great segue, because I would love to get a little bit more specific too, because you're, I'm sure, doing this probably multiple times a day. Could you talk us through sort of what your, sort of from a high level, like what's your sort of workflow? You're creating an ad for a campaign. Where do you get started? What's your sort of process in terms of what it is today, and where AI fits along that journey?
Well, most of the time, I will come into my agent, with like a fully written script, and then I will say, okay, grade it. And if it's not where I want it to be, I'm like, how do we get it there? And so it'll offer me suggestions. Sometimes I like the suggestions, sometimes I don't. I'll change it. We'll iterate. We'll go back and forth. That's kind of like the workflow. I will then use it to be like, okay, we've got like a good foundational script. Let's think about, how to extend this message arc, do that. If it's a really big race or a really important client, I create, synthetic panels of AI personas, and I'll red team it against that with like a focus group exercise, and do it anywhere between like, a panel of 10 voters, like a traditional focus group. The one thing I really like to do, and I think the AI is actually better at it at this point, is to do like a smaller, like 2-person or 4-person panel of like, these are the actual like exact swing voters that you need to win the race. And, here's the ad, or here's the concept, and run a, synthetic red team exercise against that. And all this stuff it's labor intensive, but it really adds value to the process. I see it. I have 30 years of experience here. So I've sat behind a lot of glass walls and seen a lot of focus groups. And so I know when it's kind of behaving in a real world thing and if it's not. And I just see like how the recommendations that I incorporate from AI has elevated the craft. I just know it intuitively because I have all this experience. That's why I see the real value of it. Because I know a lot of people, creative people in particular might be like, well, the AI is not going to match my craftsmanship. And, I think that's misplaced. I've heard a lot of people say, well, AI is going to remove all the administrative burdens on me so that I can, think blue sky, big thoughts. I'm like, you can think bigger blue sky thoughts if you're using AI to, sharpen your own instincts and your own skills. And that's how I use it.
Yeah, that definitely resonates, and I think is a really good use case and an example. Is there one in particular? Like, I mean, the focus groups are super fascinating. Curious too if that's a great example of this. But are there other elements where you're like, this was something that was really, and I know it's, this isn't just about speed, but in campaigns we're pretty much always under time pressure. If it's not just time, but is there something that like really was taking a long time for your firm, or like a problem that AI is like sort of fully unlocked in terms of efficiencies and sort of just like ability to move more quickly or more effectively?
Yeah, absolutely. I do think a lot of it right now is on like our reporting things. Like we have a big buying machine here that does digital and also does linear. And, clients want reporting. They want to understand, what the competitor's doing. They want to know how the digital is performing. So all of that has really been automated. And I think that's been, just a huge lifting of the burden on our team, and it's freed them up to think more strategically and, all of that. From the production standpoint, like I said, AI allows us to do like really, things that would have taken, weeks to plan and hundreds of thousands of dollars to produce. I mean, it's amazing. In the course of an afternoon, you can do a really stylized conceptual ad that, otherwise, would have taken forever. And probably the client would say it's too expensive to shoot and I don't want to do it. So I think production wise that it's just, I'm amazed by what you can do, and like I said, it's the difference between, hiring actors and shooting customized B-roll and, all things. And now you can just do it in a few hours. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
And do you feel that from the, I know you're in a service business. How do you also see this from the client's perspective? Are they also excited and appreciate, like, do you see that being a big, and I know, I've heard hesitations from folks around like, oh, well, is this something we would present to a client? Are the clients excited as well about the use of the new technology and seeing that in sort of your deliverables too? Reporting sounds like a great example there, but anything else?
Yes, they are. In politics, it's a little tricky because, there's a bunch of states, as you well know, that are trying to regulate the usage of AI. So everybody is sort of proceeding with a little bit of caution. On the Republican side, I think there's an openness to use it. I think it's also important that AI is deployed ethically and responsibly. I think as industry leaders, we have a responsibility to do that, and to ensure that we're not violating the trust of voters or offending voters, or because I think bad things will stem from that in terms of regulation. My firm also does a lot of public affairs advertising for trade associations and industry coalitions, through a brand called Plus Communications. And our corporate clients absolutely love it because they see how you can do all these cool things, and it makes the ads look different than the standard fare that has dominated the genre of, Shutterstock B-roll with, voiceovers and music. And now you can do interesting creative things, and it doesn't cost them an arm and a leg. So they're like, go, and there's less of a regulatory pressure on that because you're not dealing with contrast advertising with candidates. So I see a lot of running space in the public affairs side of our industry. But yeah, I mean, the clients, like I said at the outset, there's a lot of interest about AI. They want to talk about AI. They want to, see how to use it in their own business or their own industry. We've sponsored roundtables at our business with our clients to bring them in and bring experts outside of our own firm to talk about AI. A lot of interest in it.
Yeah, that's a really great specific example too of just getting people on board and making them feel and understand your expertise. And as we think about, sort of other industry, other firms, as you talked about public affairs too, what, as a leader in AI adoption and how your firm is really pioneering this, what are some of the like practical steps, assuming, a lot of firms are behind where you are certainly, and are kind of just thinking about where they want to, introduce AI. What would you give as like sort of your practical, and I think you had a lot of really thoughtful insights on this in the beginning too, but what are some like practical steps that a firm or a leader at a firm would take to start to put AI in place for their team or for their whole organization?
Well, I think the first step is to be like, we really want to make this an important part of our business. And then, you got to have to roll up your sleeves and learn how to use the technology. But my experience, I think, shows that you can go from 0 to 65 in a short period of time. I mean, you really can. If you want to put in the work and learn how to use the tools, it's really intuitive. I mean, it's amazing how intuitive the AI is. And if you ask it how to solve problems, it will give you good roadmaps to how to do that. And then you just learn and you go as you do it. I think the most important thing culturally is to be like, look, this is the future. Like, to turn away from AI is like, go back, 25 years ago and saying, I'm not going to use the internet in my business. I mean, it doesn't work. You have to do it. It is the future. It is going to define every industry across our economy, politics for sure. And, I would just say, don't be daunted if you feel like you're behind, because you can catch up really fast.
Yeah, that's actually really great advice, especially as we are, in very much in this election cycle and heading into, the biggest part of this year. If somebody's like, okay, today I want to start getting my hands into AI and putting that into place, would you say like, should they, sort of audit? Should they start with an internal policy? Are there sort of like use cases where you're like, that really, would start to unlock someone's idea of this? I think, in conversations I have too, folks get kind of overwhelmed by that. They're like, oh, well, I'll just dive in. Is there anything more specific you have in mind too, of like someone comes to you and they're like, Trent, I want to start, but like, where should I start? Is there a training? Is there an audit? Is there something I should do concretely?
Yeah, well, I think like a smart thing to do would be like, what is the biggest strategic challenge that we think the technology could help solve, and then step back from there. And then I think the other part is, how do you get cultural uptake across your organization to get kind of everybody using AI to improve their workflows? That's what we did. We kind of challenged our team to be like, we want you to think about your daily job, what you do, and how AI could make you better, and come up with your own individualized plan for doing that. And then, you can talk to your managers and your leaders and, talk about that. So AI is a part of our review process. Like, we meet with our employees twice a year. We meet with them in June and we meet with them in January, and they are now expected to be able to report to their managers about, here are the steps that I've taken to use AI to make myself more efficient and to make our business stronger. So everybody, is incentivized because it's tied to their compensation. But again, we're trying to like encourage people to say, look, this is like your jetpack on your career. This technology is super powerful. And I have to give Chris Georgia and my firm credit for that, analogy. He calls it, AI is your jetpack, and, we want to see your career go into the stratosphere, and it can do this for you. And so, that's how we try to drive cultural uptake. But from a business strategy perspective, I think it's like every business needs to think about how it can improve their core services and work back from there. And there's just a ton of information online. There's all kinds of, YouTube videos on how to prompt and how to build agents. And there's no shortage of information about how to use AI. It's all a matter of will, not if people can do it. It's just like everyone sort of has a fear of the unknown. And the industry established businesses, usually the leadership is older. That's just logical. And so, older people get set in their ways and don't want to change things. I kind of take some pride in the fact that I'm an old dog, but I was willing to learn new tricks. I always laugh with the kids. I'm like, when I started, we didn't Slack, we faxed. We didn't even have email when I started my career. And I've seen like where the technology has gone in my time in politics. Think of where it's going to go in your career span. I mean, you guys are all going to be like James Cameron, doing Avatar in like 6 months. It's super exciting. Just learn the technology and ride the wave. I'm an optimist about AI. I know there's a lot of fear and skepticism that it's going to replace all these jobs. I think some of that talk is like, Anthropic wanting to create a regulatory moat around themselves. I kind of am in the David Sachs camp that I think AI is just going to open opportunities for smart people to do new things that we can't even envision right now. And so I think technology historically has made life better for people. And like I said, I'm an optimist about AI. And I try to tell all the young people here, I'm like, don't think that AI is going to replace your job. It's just going to make you stronger. And we've like we're heavy users of AI. We've not cut any headcount because of it. We're just opening doors for people to be better at their jobs.
So Trent, you talked about, how AI has helped, you know, create more efficiencies, and also that you've been able to um, not lose any headcount. You've, successfully created, more opportunities for your internal staff. But can you talk about how, if at all, AI is impacting how you're staffing clients, how you sort of have organized your services internally as a firm?
I don't see, for us personally, that staffing hasn't really changed. It's an empowerment tool for us. Like again, our teams are largely the same. It's not like we're doing the thing with fewer people. Um, Again, for us, like the efficiency is like offloading a lot of our heavy duty reporting things, and I know like the folks that are doing research are able to really do that quicker. And I think of like one younger staff member in particular that his primary role was doing research. I guess he has more time now, and we've gotten him involved in doing some scripting and things like that. So that's an example. the technology is still kind of new, and we've been heavy users of it for like a year. So maybe 6 months from now, I would have a different answer for you on that.
Mm-hmm.
I can tell you it is definitely a significant efficiency tool on things like metrics reporting about buying things. That has been a significant offload that allows our folks that do that kind of work to be more strategic and to really improve the quality of their work, because they're spending less time counting, tabulating metric results and reports for clients. So I think it's made the deliverables we send to clients, we're able to do that faster, and I think we're able to do that better. So I think there's enormous benefits to that. And then on our production side, obviously the creative output, I talked about that. That's a true game changer. So I think there are definitely efficiency aspects, and I know that like a lot of people think about AI first and foremost. They think about, well, what can I do faster and what can I do more efficient? I think about AI differently, and we think about AI differently here. We don't necessarily think about how can AI make us faster. We think, how can AI make us better? And that's the cultural driver of how we use AI. And that's why I think we might be unique in the sense that we want our people to be driving the AI and to embedding it in their workflows and to make it better. And so we are for developing agents and building tools and using all of the powers of automation. But we also want, the talent, experience, inspiration of our people to really be unlocked by the technology and to fuse with it.
Yeah, I think that definitely resonates, and I think is a really good way to think about how this shift is happening. And I think, it comes to a bigger question of like, where do you see, the consultant value add? The political industry obviously is driven heavily by your insights, your ability to, see across lots of campaigns and tons of experience in that. Do you think there's a shift away from that sort of like execution level consultant to more high level advising? Is that shift actually happening? Do you see that? Was that already happening before AI and this is just sort of accelerating it? Or is it a combination of both?
I think the industry is still going to be led by people who are all in on their craft and all in on their services, and that are using all of their knowledge and their experience to be better. And I think the businesses that allow AI to elevate your experience and your knowledge and your skills are going to win. But let me give you for instance, because I know that probably there would be a lot of skepticism to be like, well, I don't want AI writing my ads because that's going to revert to the mean and it's going to be generic and it's slop. And I think that maybe people who don't have a lot of experience would have that perception about AI. I'm a very prideful copywriter. The core function of my existence at this business starts with my ability to put words together on paper, and that's kind of what is the genesis of the entire creative process. So I am, like I said, I have a prideful pen, and I can tell you that AI makes my pen sharper. And I can give you an example. Like I did this ad for John Cornyn's Senate race, and Wesley Hunt was in the primary, and I wanted to do a play off of his name, and use a Texas idiom, "That dog won't hunt." My original idea for the ad was to pair Wesley with a sleepy basset hound. And I went through it, I wrote the script, and I just asked AI, I'm like, is there a better dog to use than a basset hound? And it's like Pomeranian. And like, bam, totally better ad. And through the process of iterating with the script, I definitely had a good concept and a good script. It elevated the writing, and not only did the ad win the Reed Award for best use of AI by a creative agency, it won outstanding copywriting in an online video. That is because of AI. And so that's how I see it. I really do think that the best uses of AI across the industry are going to be led by people that have, put in good inputs into the AI. The smarter you are interacting with AI, the better you're going to get stuff back. So yes, think of it as an efficiency tool. Think of it in how you can automate. Think of it in how you can build tools to make your business, faster, smarter, and efficient. But most important, think about it, how it can make your work better. I think that's the important thing, is like, don't necessarily think about it as a shortcut. Think about it as an accelerant to, a better end product.
That is a great example of, I think there's hesitation comes with, kind of the perfect combination of what you were talking about. Like, how do folks make sure that, they have efficiencies, they have, these new tools? How does that work and still maintain, the authenticity, the real human element that you just talked about with that was a great analogy with the sharpening of your pen. How do folks balance those two things as they approach, implementing AI in their work?
I think that has to be core to your culture and like how you use AI. So, every organization is going to be different. Like, some would want to have use policies, or here are AI standards, or, however you drive the cultural change inside your business. We do it by lunch and learns, where partners and innovators inside the business beneath the partner level talk about the best uses of AI. Like I said, we showcase people here through our AI Innovators series. We do videos on, people, how they're using AI 101 type videos. And so we kind of do it collaboratively across departments and divisions. And like I said, it's embedded deeply into our culture. It's part of our review process. So it's kind of a constant reinforcement loop, and best uses emerge and people learn from that. So, you can make AI as central to your business as you want it to be. I think it's in everyone's interest to do that. And, I've tried to explain how we think about it here and do it. I hope that's helpful to folks. But yeah, it's a wonderful opportunity. And I think with AI, everybody can use it in their own ways. They should use it. And you're going to find out, when your business's challenges, how to make it work for you.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think, obviously in every job function is going to be slightly different, and how they apply it. I think that's a really clear takeaway there. Yeah. Why we're both here, definitely also just internally optimistic about, what we can do and what's possible. And I know you just shared a lot, which I just also learned a huge amount from you as well. And I'm wondering, as we sort of finish this conversation, are there any sort of thoughts that you'd like to leave folks with? I think the jetpack is a really great way to think about it. Are there other sort of, just closing thoughts that you want to share with listeners about what they should sort of think about and sort of leave this conversation with?
Yeah, I just think it truly is transformative technology, and it can help everyone in our industry, from the smallest firms to the biggest firms. But I do think we have a burden, because politics is about creating choices. It's about contrast at its core. And there is a lot of concern about using the technology in an irresponsible way. So I think for our industry to harness the true potential of AI, we're going to have to be ethical and responsible in how we use it. And so I think that's incumbent on everybody who cares about the industry and the future of the industry, because we've seen how we've been sort of deplatformed from different things. Like, I remember when Facebook had, a SWAT team of reps that were going around to Republican and Democrat firms being like, here's how you can target on our platform. Here's how you can do all these great innovative things. There was the Cambridge Analytica scandal, and then all of a sudden you could no longer target on Facebook. So there can be bad consequences if you are not responsible in the use of AI. So I think that's really important. I think ethics around AI are essential. But I think that, it is wonderful technology, and it opens so many doors to what you can do with a business. And I just encourage everybody to ride the wave.
Well, thank you, Trent. This was really an incredible conversation. I really appreciate you sharing all of these insights, and for the AAPC for arranging this interview and conversation. I think this is, such an important part of our industry, and really encouraging the use and the ethical use, and the, ability for us to just pioneer a new way of political campaigns. So thank you. And with that, I'll wrap our conversation, and Trent, hope to talk with you soon.
Thank you. I really enjoyed it.
Thanks for listening to the Future of Political Consulting. We hope this conversation gave you practical ideas for leveraging AI to expand capacity, strengthen client service, and elevate your role as a strategic advisor. Be sure to visit the AAPC.org for more resources, events, and conversations about the future of our profession. Until next time, thanks for joining us as we explore what's next in political consulting.